to be honest with you, I've loved talking about this guy as a potential head coaching candidate for like the last 4 or 5 years. And, he's interviewed at a couple of different spots. He's interviewing in a couple of different places here this time around as well. Jacksonville, Chicago, those are two that come off the top of my head really quick that I can remember that he's got interviews with. But this is somebody who has an extensive football background. Some people look at what he has done as the offensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens and they go, oh yeah, okay, well he's Lamar's offensive coordinator. How hard could that be? Okay, well you need to turn back the clock a little bit if you think that's all Todd Monken is, because before that he was the offensive coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs, those 2 national championship seasons where Stetson Bennett was his quarterback and he was getting the most out of Stetson Bennett. He was the Cleveland Browns and Buccaneers offensive coordinator. Before that he was the OC behind Dirk Cutter when they were orchestrating one of the most potent offenses in the NFL. Now, it was Jameis Winston, so they were lighting up the scoreboard all the time. They were scoring a ton of points. They couldn't really stop a lot of people, but that offense and Todd Monken's side of things was certainly firing on all cylinders. Before that, though, he does have head coaching experience. He was the head coach at Southern Miss from 2013 to 2015, and in that period of time, he took Southern Miss from initially being ranked, I believe it was somewhere around the 80th scoring offense in the FBS, and he brought them all the way into the top 20 by the time it was all said and done. The 2 years before that, he was the offense coordinator at Oklahoma State, where he had the number 2 and number 3 scoring offenses in all of college football. So Todd Monken knows offense, man. He understands how to get it done. He's done so with quarterbacks like Jameis Winston. He's done so with quarterbacks like Brandon Weeden when he was at Oklahoma State, with Stetson Bennett, and of course we're seeing what he is able to do with Lamar Jackson. So it's not like this guy just elevates bad quarterbacks and makes them serviceable. And it's not like he just takes serviceable quarterbacks and makes them good. He also takes great quarterbacks and makes them even better. Look at Lamar. I'm not saying this to take anything away from Lamar Jackson himself and how he has worked to be a better player, but Lamar won MVP last year. He was even better this year. That's incredible to have that type of connection with your offensive coordinator, to be able to go to them and say, we won MVP last year. Let's be even better this year. And Todd Monken goes, let's do it. And they found a way to do it and stay innovative and stay ahead of the curve and stay unstoppable. Ollie, interviews, potential staff, we talked about it with Liam Cohen. Like that's sometimes what goes into you not getting these head coaching gigs. But for a league that is starving for offense, and specifically offensive-minded head coaches, because then they're not going to get poached anywhere because they're already your head coach, it's hard for me to believe this guy hasn't gotten a crack at an NFL head coaching gig. Maybe it comes this cycle, but man, his resume is incredibly impressive.
Incredibly impressive. It's really hard for me to fathom that Dave Canales, who may wind up being a good head coach, got a head coaching gig before Todd Monken did. I just cannot rationalize that in any perceivable way. The thing I love about Monken, first of all, you mentioned those Oklahoma State teams gave me so many flashbacks. Still one of the best offenses to study. Brandon Weeden, Justin Blackman, 50 go balls a game, outrageous scoring all over the place. What a great time in college football. What I love about him is, we mentioned the adaptability with Liam Cohen before. He has had significant career shifts as he's advanced in age, which is really unusual. I mean, he was at the forefront of innovation and evolution. You mentioned with kind of the college resume, pure air raid offense. Let's go have some fun. We're throwing the ball over the place. He's a former receivers coach. He's coached quarterback. So pretty easy connection. I'm going to have the ball thrown a lot to the receivers, the guys I know and like, and the quarterbacks who I've taught how to throw the football. Then when he goes to Georgia and they win the national championship, he really embraces, becomes kind of one of the high priests, wandering around the coaching circuit, preaching the gospel of the power spread, which is what I mentioned before about, can you get to two-back football with kind of spread principles tucked in there too? Can you do it from smaller formations? Can you sneak some spread principles into the thing? Can you mesh those two worlds together? And there's two ways of doing that. You can either take the Shane Steichen approach, which is just spread the formation out and you run like power sets in the run game, right? Or you have a quarterback downhill run game like Anthony Richardson, Cam Newton, those kind of bigger body Josh Allen guys. Or do you get a tighter, more congested offense like Liam Cohen did and sprinkle on some like the spread goodness of the RPO game, lots of motion and shifting to spread the formation at the snaps, some of the Mike McDaniel stuff. The thing Monken has done, I think, as well as any coach at any level of football, is fuse all of it together in like one delicious pie, essentially. And they can just kind of rock from what they want to do week to week, depending on the personnel. And he has so many unbelievable one-off designs, opponent-specific designs. And like Liam Cohen, which is kind of funny, is he will hit the same thing 3 or 4 times within a game, often within a quarter, because he's like, I built this to go and get this DC. It's me against this guy. Let me go get it. And if I get it, I'm going again and again and again. I didn't spend those sleepless nights not with my kids to not be able to call this thing 4 or 5 times to try and attack this guy. So I just think he's got such a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. You used the word wisdom before. He is like the walking Bible of like football evolution over recent times, and has managed to fuse it all in. And it's a slight caveat. He's working with a guy who may be a 3-time MVP, is a once-in-a-lifetime talent, but he's been able to say, I'm putting everything into this guy, because if there's one guy you can handle all the pre-snap operation, all the post-snap operation, every single passing concept you can figure out from my air raid world, every single read and react play in the run game or the RPO world, it's this really special guy who will never throw an interception for me and just throw it to grass and will go and house people in the passing game and on the ground. So the fact he's not even had a true look where it's like, leaked 3 weeks early that he is the hottest name on the carousel, it can only to me be something in the interview process, something in the personality. Maybe he's grouchy, I don't know well enough. Maybe he's not cool and young enough for the owners, but the resume is there that if you've got a quarterback issue, if you're saying we were going to make Caleb Williams great, there's a guy sat right here who has made quarterbacks great everywhere he goes.
That connection in Chicago, I don't know if that's ultimately what ends up happening, but to me, I love that one. I love Todd Monken getting his hands on working with Caleb Williams and improving who he is as an NFL player, because I started my career in journalism at Pewter Report covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it was those years that Dirk Cutter was the head coach and Todd Monken was the offensive coordinator. We didn't get to talk to Todd Monken a ton, just because you don't get to talk to the coordinators a ton during the season, but every time that we had the opportunity to talk to Monken, he is straightforward, man. He's no BS. He'll answer the questions that you have for him. He's not dancing around them. And this is just somebody who tells it like it is. And I feel as though he had, and this is 2017, 2018. I mean, think of what the last 6 years have done for him, being that offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, going to the Cleveland Browns, his time with the Georgia Bulldogs, and then for what we have seen from the Baltimore Ravens too. If he was that way in Tampa, and I think that he was allowed to be as straightforward and no BS as possible, because he knew. He's experienced this stuff. So when people ask him questions, when people sometimes the offense, wasn't clicking, or guys could have been a little bit more involved. That was when Deshaun Jackson was in and out, and you're drafting, O.J. Howard really high in the draft, but you're using Cam Brate more than O.J. Howard. And so it's like, okay, we've got all these questions for you about personnel choices and and he's like, I have a reason for everything that we are doing on this offense. We have a reason for it. And he gave it to us. And there were questions, why don't you get O.J. Howard involved a little bit more? And he's like, because Cam Brate's better at this opportunity. And he would break it down for you, and he would tell you exactly why this would be the case. So if he had this wisdom back in 2017, 2018, he's only got way more wisdom now. So when you're becoming a head coach in the NFL, Ollie, we know this, not from experience, but from covering the NFL and watching the NFL for a long time, there are a little bit of politics that are involved. There's a little bit of ego stroking that goes on, where you got to be willing to be a teammate a little bit here. You got to be willing to play ball with whoever the general manager is. If you are getting hired to a situation that already has a general manager, you got to be willing to play ball a little bit when it comes to working with the owner and hearing the owner out, especially when you're the head coach. And sometimes these owners like to get a little bit more active in game day roster decisions, where the ball's going, all this kinds of stuff. If he is a little bit more of a, no, I know how to do things. Like I don't need your help. I don't want this to be a collaborative effort between the owner and the general manager and the head coach. Like, I got the game day roster, I got the game plans. And if maybe some situations don't love that, I can understand why he maybe has not gotten a gig. But it's funny, because I would tell you that where that might be seen as a negative to not hire him as the head coach, I would tell you that's actually a positive of how you would get the most out of that team. So to me,
that's why dysfunctional franchises stay dysfunctional, right? And one of the big ones that comes up, I mean, I've interviewed with teams before, and one of the questions they always ask you is, you explain to us why you think things are going wrong. Now, if they're asking the scouting assistant, I assume they're asking the man who's going to be the most handsomely paid member of the coaching staff, right? And now that question is a real trip. But I remember there's a great Mike McCarthy story about this. Often it's about perception. If you come in with a really brusque answer, and they think you're kind of Mike McCarthy, somewhat lovable bear, even though you seem like you're always angry with everyone, and then you give a howitzer of an answer and you just tee off on the building, they kind of like, whoa, our stuff must really be bad because Mike McCarthy says it's pretty bad, and I don't think you would normally do that. But if you're that kind of direct communicator and you go into one of these buildings, and we know some of the main candidates, and that's why these teams are hiring coaches every 2 years, where people are too involved, there's a ton of egos, maybe the son is calling the shots, and you start laying out what you think is wrong from the outside perspective, that will not always go over so well as if you try and kind of fib around the issue, right? It's like getting hired at any job and say, actually, I think you're doing some really good stuff. There's just tweaks I can make here and there. And you tell yourself in the back of your mind, once I get in the door, I can make more sweeping changes. But to get through the interview, I'll kind of say, no, I actually think some of the talent evaluations have been really good. These guys have been misused. Whereas he maybe has the characteristic of walking in and saying, this is wrong, that is wrong. This needs to change, that needs to change. Here's the plan. And maybe people just don't want to hear that.
Yeah. I believe the spots that he has interviewed with Todd Monken are the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Chicago Bears, and the Las Vegas Raiders as well. I will throw that out there. I think he'd be great in all three situations. Obviously, getting to work with the two quarterbacks, and then whoever the quarterback is going to be with the Raiders. Todd Monken being the one to sort of guide that process and say, no, I think this guy can play ball. Then I think that's going to be a good setup for where the Raiders are going to want to go moving forward. But we will see. Looks like that's a Ben Johnson connection as well. So not sure anybody, for as much as we've talked about Ben Johnson over the last couple of years, I don't know if Ben Johnson wants the job. I don't know if anybody's going to get it over Ben Johnson. So it feels like maybe Chicago or Jacksonville are those two spots that are a little bit more likely for Todd Monken.
Don't you feel like that Dallas would be a really good spot for him, where it's almost like you can just get on with coaching the football team because Jerry will handle all the other stuff that a lot of coaches don't actually want to deal with? People get very upset about Jerry giving interviews. A lot of coaches like, I'm good. Can I coach the football team? And you can take all the oxygen and the heat. Now, having to answer for his comments every week, I think can drive some people berserk, and it clearly annoyed Mike McCarthy. But I just feel like Monken has the kind of personality where if you just said to him, you get Dak, a veteran quarterback, so everything is on the menu for you. You get CeeDee Lamb. We'll invest in a back. We'll invest in the offensive line. That to me just seems like if you're trying to kind of raise the floor of that offense, what Mike McCarthy did, that to me would be a really clean fit of where you get a professional football coach. You're not taking a chance on a first-time go-around guy. I mean, this is a guy who's had to deal with, like, my left tackle flunked out of science class, and so now he can't start for us on Saturdays. Like, that's very... That's when you're saying, like, he's, like, unbothered, unfazed by questions with the media. He's like, yeah, I have to deal with this nonsense in college football. Trust me, this is small potatoes that my running back was late to practice one day.
Look, I love the football fit. I think he'd be great with Dak. He has an interview with Dallas. I don't really think they will consider him. And I think it might be because, you know, there might be a little bit of clashing there with Jerry Jones and Todd Monken. I love him and Dak, so I love the shout out there. I don't think that one's going to happen. I think my favorite is still Chicago. Him getting to work with Caleb Williams and him being in a situation where Chicago fans are incredibly passionate and they are now starved to be good. And this is a head coach that has the wisdom and experience to back up every decision that he makes. And I think that when questions arise, as they will in the city of Chicago, because it's a very football passionate city, this is somebody who I feel like can have the identity to really be able to stand up to that job. It's a little bit like Nick Sirianni with Philadelphia, where sometimes it feels like, you know, oil and water, where they're never going to mix. They're always going to butt heads. But at the same time, when things are going well in Philadelphia, Nick Sirianni sort of like embodies that attitude that the city of Philadelphia and the fan base has. So it's like when things are going good, you love to lean into this type of a personality. And I kind of feel like that's also the case with Todd Monken. So I would like that.
One thing I'll say about Monken that I think is important for wherever he lands is he schematically is a really egoless coach. Right. So when he got to Baltimore, it's not as if he said everything Greg Roman did was a dud. He recognized that a lot of the run game stuff was pretty magical, pretty cool, pretty inspiring. So he said, I'm going to keep as much of this as I can physically do while not constraining what was happening with the rest of the offense, which is our passing game became a disaster. Spacing was messed up. There's no rhythm, all that stuff. What is the tilt point where I can keep as much as possible while actually refreshing the passing game, overhauling elements, building in a kind of new RPO structure than what we did before. And they've kept, and then this season, when they've been, 73% of the time this season, they've been with two tight ends or two backs in the field. That is a really, really wild number. We're in 2025. And people are rolling out two backs and two tight ends 23% of the time in some configuration thereof. So he has reverted back to a lot of what they were doing back then. Greg Roman's getting crushed all the time now with the Chargers, got crushed all the time for sabotaging Lamar in the passing game, right? And this guy was, you mentioned the word wise a bunch, wise enough to recognize this stuff's really good. People are complaining about stuff that's really, really good. We can do other things that are a bit of a mess, bit broken, that didn't actually mesh with it that well, didn't tie the whole offense together. If I can correct that and we can keep all this stuff, and then my GM's going to go and sign Derrick Henry, I'm going to get head coaching interviews. I'm going to go do this. Well, I don't need to install my own new run game and take away from Lamar and Derrick Henry. That'd be foolish. So I just really like that head coach. And that to me is when you can see distinctly when you get a lifer who's getting this kind of special chance with this quarterback, when they've been in the game for so long, and it isn't purely about, I'm going to design a new offense and they'll build me statues and call me Bill Walsh. It's like, what is the best way for me to put the most destructive offense on the field? If someone else built 20% of this thing, who cares? I'm going to call the plays. He's a great place. So I love that idea, particularly in Chicago, when you mentioned like a culture reset. Someone who's just like no nonsense, all business. And if there's stuff he likes from stuff they've done defensively, where at times they've had good defenses, well, when Eberflus was there at least, right. I'm going to keep some of that stuff because the personnel's the same. And I'm not, I don't have such a big ego that I'm bringing everything my way or the highway. So I think that fit in particular, as you noted, is a really strong one.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below. So if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.